So let's continue our discussion further here, and let's see a bit more on this security boundary concept, and try to make a sense, try to create a picture which gives more insight, basically. To do that, what I'm going to create here is I will be creating an architecture of a data center. Don't worry, it will not be too much. It will be just a typical architecture showing how a data center is segmented in different logical boundaries, and what these boundaries create. These boundaries create basically a zone, a network segment with a different kind of control. A specific network zone. So yeah, when I create, I think it will be more clear. Rather, I only talk. So let's draw it here. Be with me, and then I will explain you what I mean by different logical boundaries. So if there's a company, I'm taking an example of a company which is connected to internet, and they have their own network as well, right? It's not just the internet connection for a company, but the company is is having multiple sites, and they are also connected, right? So a company, when it comes to internet, you will be having internet first. There will be internet, and then what will happen is this internet will get connected to an organization which will be protected with a firewall, right? Now, within this network, there will be a zone. So this box with two arrow in opposite direction, this represent a switch, or a box which is having multiple network ports where you connect servers, right? So this box is the Internet Edge Device, IED, and this firewall, whenever we have a firewall, then you have an IP-based IP and port. When I say port, it's TCP or UDP, a layer 4 network port, right? So IP and port based boundary. So you have logically created an IP port based boundary where this is basically an untrusted segment, and this side is something which we call generally in the network design, it's called DMZ. It's called Demilitarized Zone. So any network which is having its connection to internet is called DMZ in a very plain and simple term, right? So you have got an untrusted segment, untrust here, and then you have got a DMZ segment here. Now this DMZ segment will have those servers or infrastructure which need direct internet access. You can think of an organization's proxy server or a DNS server. So those kind of systems will be there in DMZ. By DNS, I mean like the DNS who is talking to the root DNS server, right? Now, this DMZ will, since I said that the infrastructure here, the servers and connection will direct internet access. So of course, they will be having a specific security controls over them, which will be more restrictive, right? It will be restricted to who can access those servers. So let's create a couple of servers here. Let's say this is one server connected. This is another server. There will be n number of servers connected here on DMZ. It could be DNS, proxy, reverse proxy, or a web server, right? Which require a direct internet facing. So those kind of things will be there. Then we may have a different boundary because you can't put a critical production server here and expose that to internet, right? So you will be having a boundary again created, and this boundary will connect to again a different network zone. Let's be noted by switch, and there you will be having further systems connected, right? I will come to that, but let's create a boundary here again. Now this firewall is also having two different levels. The way we have this internet firewall having an untrust zone and a DMZ. Now this firewall in IP network design, when we talk network segmentation, this firewall which actually separates a DMZ and a zone which is more secure than DMZ is called an intranet firewall. So this will be an intranet firewall. And the firewall which is connected to internet is an internet edge device. And you may also call it as internet firewall. So internet firewall is actually creating two different network zones. One is DMZ and one is untrusted internet. Whereas intranet is also giving rise to two different logical boundaries, which is two different logical segment with a boundary. Sorry, excuse me for my wrong sentence. One is DMZ and one is intranet. I will call this whole thing as intranet. You must have heard this term intranet, that we are on a company intranet. What it means that we are in a secure network zone, which is having access to the company resources in some restrictive way, right? Now on intranet, what is gonna happen? Like you will be having different kind of things. You may have some users hanging here. So you may have a switch basically where users will be connecting. Like they will be having, by user, I mean the user machine, the laptop which they carry, right? So they will be connected here. I will call this as a user segment, right? Now, this user, what they will access when they connect to internet, sorry, when they connect to the network, basically intranet, the first thing they need is a connection to the domain controller where their identity will be verified. Then they will need access to email. Then they will need access to some file server. So those kind of things are the IT management systems, basically. Now, can we expose those IT management system directly to the user? It will be too dangerous because it's not the uh, attack which can come from internet. Attacks can, and most of the attacks are originated internally, right? Then what will you do? You will actually have another boundary created with a firewall, and there you will be having things like Active Directory, file server. What else do you have? You may have a, a, a jump host. Basically, a jump host is a box, Linux box or a Windows box, which is used to gain access to the different infrastructure components for IT users, right? So if it's not only the user who need access to email or file server, there will be some set of super user or IT management user who will be managing these firewalls, the switches, or the domain servers, or the file server itself. So we can't expose that access to every user. So we can restrict that access with a jump host. And it's a good idea to have something called two-factor authentication enabled on the jump host. And we give SMS based or some QR code based or OTP based two-factor authentication to the IT management user, because this jump host is will be very critical. If someone get access to this jump host, he can destroy the network basically, or destroy the different servers, because this server will be having unrestricted access to the critical components, right? So here you also see that there is a boundary created. Now this boundary is a separation between intranet, because this whole thing is intranet, and this whole thing is intranet basically. Now, and what we will call this zone as. So this zone, we can name it IT management zone, right? It's a good idea to segregate IT management zone, because if we don't, then it will be very difficult uh, to stop some kind of attacks or some kind of unauthorized access from user segment. In companies who are not that they don't have much budget to buy more equipment, they may have everything in one network, but still a two-factor authentication and jump host. So that will create a sort of a sub-logical boundary, basically, not a boundary separated by a IP port restriction, but there are ways to achieve the same thing using some techniques which are called like the concept of private VLANs and those kind of things, achieve the same thing. But from a CISSP perspective, we should only be concerned with the data flow. The data flow says that you can't have a direct user access to a critical infrastructure. Then what you need an access restriction with two-factor. How we will do it? We will do it using a jump host, right? Because we can't have a two-factor authentication on every server, like on AD, on file server. It's one, it's not that cost effective. Second, it will be too much burden on each and every user who is trying to connect to a domain controller and is asked to verify using a two-factor authentication. Just imagine how frustrated senior executives will be. Now, this is the way you should get an idea of the basic network zone we have. Again, you may have some servers which are business server, which are actually the trade secret software, which are running the company. The company is getting revenue from them. You can further have another firewall which may separate those kind of system and call it like let's have this let's say I would say this as a critical uh, business logic server, right? It is something which is if this is exposed, the company is gone. Now this kind of server will be much more strict. So if you see here, this critical business logic server will have some application, right? Now this application uh, will be doing something, but it may require access from the users who are on internet, right? So how the data flow will come will look like. So the user will hit the web server, and the web server will actually access this critical server. So you are not allowing a direct TCP connection all the way from internet to the critical business server. You are stopping the connection on a DMZ server, which is very restrictive. And then this DMZ server is again basically a web server is starting a connection to the critical business logic server, right? Crossing two different firewalls. So you have two-tier security from DMZ to the production server, and a three-tier security from an internet user to the business server, right? So this is the kind of logical control we enforce using firewalls. And and if you look into the classification which we discussed, it's a form of network zone or security zone, basically. This part which we just discussed now. Now, infrastructure classification, I have already discussed that we classify infrastructure and we put different controls on them. And this classification actually comes from the data which resides on those servers, right? So as I explained here, you will be having some systems in DMZ, you will be having some system in IT management zone, and some system in critical business zone, like, or you can call it as a production zone. Let's call it as a production zone. So these systems will be classified differently than a DMZ server, right? Or like likes of the DNS server or proxy server. We can discuss different data flow if required, or if you are interested, you can put in comment that we want to know about how DNS server will be positioned and how the data flow will look like, or the proxy server. We can discuss those in details, but that's not the intent of CISSP. From a CISSP point of view, you should only know that there exists a logical boundary. This logical boundary is enforced using firewalls, and there is an organization information security policy which will dictate the data flow, and those data flow will be mapped using the concept of IP port restriction, routing, private VLANs, access control list. So those techniques will be used to realize the security boundaries. I hope this video has been informative, and this clarifies the different type of security boundaries and the different forms of logical boundary. If you have any further question, you can put in comment. And there are many other things which is already there in the book. I'm not going to repeat everything. I have just explained the concept, and I hope this will serve as an anchor in your mind to further attract knowledge on top of it. Let's end the video. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, and you can subscribe the channel for similar videos. Hope to see you again in next video. Thanks for watching.